Right, we're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's 9 a.m. and we're going to begin the Education Preparation and Licensure Subcommittee. Joining us today on the committee are Mr. Bob Eby and Mr. Mike Edwards. I also want to welcome those who are presenters from ETS as well as State Board staff, and to join us in the future will be the Department of Education staff. I do want to remind all of the presenters to please state your name and title before you begin speaking. I do want to let you all know that Executive Director Sarah Morrison is not able to join us today. She is traveling, but representing her is Ms. Amy Owen, who also has the very first agenda item. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy to take us through the agenda and introduce herself and other speakers. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. This is Amy Owen, Director of Policy and Research with the State Board of Education. We have 3 topics for you all to consider today. The first will be a presentation on the upcoming 2019 Educator Preparation Report Card. Our staff is engaged in the process of collecting stakeholder feedback on ways we can improve the design of the report card, and we're going to share that information with you all as well as our next steps moving forward. We'll then hear from Kathy Pruner and Jerry DeLuca at ETS about a product they have called Ethica that helps educators learn about the Model Code of Ethics, which is now required by the State Educator Preparation Rule. So this will be one option for EPPs and school districts moving forward. Finally, we'll hear from David Donaldson and Michael Derline at the Department of Education on updates related to educator licensure and preparation. If y'all don't have any questions, I will go ahead and move forward into our presentation about the Educator Preparation Report Card. All right. So to start with, as you all know, there are 2 different yearly reports about educator preparation. The State Board of Education produces report cards for each educator preparation provider. The Department of Education produces annual reports. Now, the report card is a high-level report designed for external stakeholders and public accountability, where we highlight educator preparation providers' performance on some key state priority areas. The DOE annual reports are much more detailed, and they're what EdPrep providers can use for process improvements. The annual reports also set a minimum bar for programs to continue operation, because failure to meet expectations for 2 consecutive years triggers an interim review process. Today we're focusing on the State Board Educator Prep Report Card. I just wanted to set that context so we all remember there's 2 different reports going on here. The State Board has produced the report card in its current online format for the last 3 years, and we're really pleased with the progress we've seen so far, but we also know there's more we can do in terms of enhancing accessibility for different audiences and incorporating more data that would be useful to different groups. So starting in about February, we worked with a researcher from Vanderbilt to collect feedback from several different groups of stakeholders who had not previously been using the report card very much. Those would be prospective teacher candidates, folks wanting to go into educator preparation, school level leaders, and district level leaders. You can see those people in the sort of blue circles on the bottom of the slide. To date, we found the folks who use the report card the most are EPPs themselves, which is fantastic, legislators and state level leaders who are trying to get a picture of educator preparation across the state, and other community and advocacy groups. So we're trying to keep our core folks interested and make sure we continue to be useful to them, while also expanding to new audiences. Our stakeholder outreach included presentations and surveys to teacher candidates, people who are currently in an EdPrep program at several different universities. Part of this was a tour that our board member Nick Darnell did in the 1st Congressional District of 3 different EdPrep programs, King, East Tennessee State, and Tusculum, as well as some folks at Vanderbilt that we were able to speak with. I spoke with the Governor's Academy for School Leaders, which are people who are assistant principals and looking to move up in school leadership. And we also spoke with the Tennessee Organization of School Superintendents. Not all of them filled out our survey, but all of them did give us, their board gave us feedback, as well as district human resources professionals, so the folks who are oftentimes recruiting and hiring from our EdPrep programs. I'm briefly going to go through the information we gathered there. From the teacher candidates, they thought the most valuable features of the report card were that they were able to learn about EPPs across the state, learn about their overall performance, and they're particularly interested, as you would be, in terms of whether or not people are getting jobs. That makes a lot of sense. You know, you're going to college to get a degree. You want to make sure you'll be employed. And whether the teachers from each program had a strong impact in the classroom in terms of observation and TVAS scores. What they wished we had on the report card was a way to filter by program type. So, for example, to say, I want to be a high school history teacher. What programs would be available to me where I could get endorsed in that area? They wanted to see a map of district partnerships. Which school districts do EPPs tend to work with? So they could anticipate where they might be student teaching or eventually getting hired. They also suggested that we share this information through high school counselors. They said they didn't know, by and large, the report card had existed when they were trying to choose their school, and that this information could have been helpful to them. One comment was that when you're choosing your ed prep program or your college, it's something that's going to have a really big impact on the rest of your life, and so having the most information possible would be useful. So I think we were really excited to hear what would be useful to students, and we're certainly going to try to incorporate their feedback. When we spoke to school leaders, it was very interesting. A lot of them said that the information was, nicely displayed. It was useful. They were interested to see it was there. But when they're going about hiring somebody to teach in their school, they're much less concerned about the ed prep program overall, and they're concerned about the individual candidate in front of them. And I think that makes a lot of sense. The report card might simply not be the right level of information for their purposes, and I think that's okay. I think we're not equipped to be going down to how each individual from an ed prep program was performing. District leaders found the report card useful. They requested some of the same features that our teacher candidates did, but from their perspective, it was to know, if I need to hire a high school science teacher, who's been producing the most of them? Where can I go to hire those folks? Or where can I go to recruit them? They were really interested in knowing more about the program requirements. So what does it take to get into one of these ed prep programs? So that if they have potential teacher candidates, they know where to send them. We asked one specific question. We have not to date been scoring the third-year retention metrics, so we were asking them whether or not it would be useful. Most of them thought it would be, so that's something that we'll take into consideration for the future. Our conclusions from this research were that we have a few most requested new tools, a way to sort and filter by program type, information on the number of completers in each endorsement area, and more information on district and EPP partnerships. We were thinking we might also consider a way to have more guiding questions for users. So for example, you might have been on a website where they say, what are you trying to do? You might say, I am trying to choose an ed prep program, or I am trying to hire teachers. Some way to give folks a little more guidance as they're using the website. Overall, there was general positive feedback about the information and a lot of positive feedback about how it was presented, though we certainly see areas for improvement. But overall, the usage from those groups was low, so this really emphasized to us the need for better and more outreach. I'm going to pause there if you have questions on specifically the stakeholder outreach portion of what we did before we move into options for new metrics and the potential to revise existing ones. And just a reminder that if you are not speaking, please make sure that your phone or your computer are on mute to minimize feedback.
Amy, this is Lillian. I do have a question because I know the very last bullet on your last slide, conclusions from stakeholder research, to do with the usage remaining low and outreach efforts will be critical. When I was tooling around this yesterday and I was thinking about it from an end user, where would I go? Where would I think to go to even look for this kind of information? And I'm thinking, okay, if I'm thinking about going to Vanderbilt or Tennessee Tech, it doesn't matter, UT Martin, I'm likely to go to their website to look for information about their program. So I don't know, even with when you think about the promotion of this, the marketing of it, I don't think people would even know to go to our website. What I did was pretend like I didn't know anything, and I said, well, let me go to the Department of Education. Of course, it may be there somewhere, but I know it's on our website, and of course, it's easy to find there through that search tool. So I think we need to really think about it from that angle as well. with an end user using it. And we're thinking about candidates who want to choose where they go and they want to see this kind of information. They don't even know it exists. So, but where do I go to find it? So I think that's going to be really critically important going forward. So that was one observation that I had and one comment.
I think that's a great way to go about trying to figure out, if you had that veil of ignorance, if you didn't know where to go, would you end up here? That's certainly something we'll take into consideration and try to find a way to work with.
Yeah, this is Bob. I agree with what Lillian is saying. And one thing is I was looking through the data, thinking about where the districts might want to use it most. The leaders, they're not looking at it because of the grain size. One might be what schools provide a more diverse set of candidates. And I think you addressed that later in your talk, but that's one area that we might want to highlight too.
Great, thank you. So based on what Bob was saying, I'm going to move into some time to generate ideas with you all, and we did this same activity with our advisory council in July, so I'll be very interested to add your feedback in to consider what new metrics we might want to include this year and potential revisions to existing metrics. We've held most things constant for the last 3 years, and that was intentional. We don't want to constantly change the goalpost so that programs try to improve in one area and then suddenly find, oh, it doesn't count on the report card anymore. That would be very frustrating. But 3 years, we use a 3-year cohort of data, so about every 3 years feels like a good moment to ensure that we're still prioritizing things that are important to us and weighting them appropriately. So I'll be interested in your feedback as we go through. First, we're going to think about overall considerations, thinking about the landing page when you first get to the report card. We heard from our stakeholders that there are certain things they wanted, which are listed here, way to filter by program type, undergrad versus post-bac. By endorsement area offered, and leading with a map of Tennessee with little pins or something for each of the providers so they're easy to find in your area. We also are working with our vendor, a company called Tembo that's produced the report card for us for the last 3 years. They have some tools where you can do essentially comparison shopping. You could say, I want to pick 3 EPPs and compare them side by side on certain metrics. So that's something we're interested in incorporating as well. Are there other ideas on that landing page, the first one you get to, that you'd like us to look into? Then in terms of our scored metrics, there are several things we're thinking about doing here. We do want to revisit our scoring framework. We are working with the Department of Education to obtain satisfaction data, both from completers, somebody who finished a program, how satisfied were you with that program, and also from people who employ those folks. How, thinking about your candidates from, say, Austin P, how satisfied are you with their preparation? Those things are still in the works, and we need to make sure that we have a reliable way to score them, but our goal is to move forward in including those in our scoring framework. We might modify the way points are earned. Currently, they're earned based on percentiles. So are you in the top 10 percentile of EPPs, the top 50, something like that? We've heard from our providers that this doesn't feel very comfortable. It feels like they might almost be pitted against each other, which is certainly not what we want. So we might move toward a system of benchmarks where if you meet X percent, then you are a level 3. The trick, of course, would be to make sure those benchmarks are things that are ambitious, but something you can meet, and that they are something that's fair across our programs. One way we might do that would be to better align our metrics with the Department of Ed's annual reports. They do use a benchmark system like that, and they have an educator preparation working group with many EPP representatives that have helped set those benchmarks over the years. We might think about different ways to measure diversity. Currently, we specifically look at racial and ethnic diversity, and I think there's pretty strong research there that that's important for students' academic and social outcomes, but perhaps we could include some sort of gender or socioeconomic status diversity. And finally, we're working with the Department of Education to ensure that what we are currently counting as high demand endorsement areas continue to be our highest demand endorsement areas. We've been using those for 3 years, and we need to make sure there's not some other need that's cropped up. when we think about things that we score, so not just things that are informational, are there other ideas or suggestions that you have?
Amy, this is Lillian. I have a question relative to the first bullet, the satisfaction data,
Sure.
because when I was thinking about this and what other ideas, I wanted to just ask you, in consideration of when you do satisfaction surveys from the LEAs, are you thinking about how you drill down within an LEA? Because the director may very much be very engaged and want to weigh in. Principals certainly, HR directors, managers, whatever their titles are. And I'm just thinking about those levels within an LEA to where you're going to get really solid, rich data, as opposed to it goes to one person and that one person may keep it to themselves and not share it. So I think we need to think very strategically about how we get that satisfaction data.
You're absolutely right. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
And we would never score anything that was based on just one person's report. That would not be fair or reliable at all. The department is working out how to actually drill down to principals who have new teachers in their buildings. So saying, okay, reflect on Amy and Bob based on how well prepared, let's just say Bob and I went to the same EPP. Thinking of Amy and Bob, how well do you think they were prepared? How well did their EPP do? What areas do you think they were not as well prepared in? Getting down to the people who actually see them day to day and observe their instruction.
Thank you. That's important. And then on the other, the diversity measure, I'm sitting here thinking, I like the idea of expanding the definition of diversity and what that would include. The other piece of it, when I think about diversity from attracting people of color, I'm all over that, and I think we absolutely need to be doing that. But I'm also sitting here thinking, you know, if I'm in an urban area like, I'm just going to say Memphis, where it's maybe a lot easier for me to attract people of color, I'm wondering the other stumbling blocks that EPPs have when they're in a very rural community with 98% white and people of color saying, I don't want to go there. You know, some other levels of stumbling blocks. So I'm thinking about how do you survey individuals from color to understand what the challenges and issues are that would prevent them from wanting to go to a rural, very, very rural community where there's very few people that look like them. I've heard that constantly from my friends who are of color. We struggle here in town as it is. So I can see this as a stumbling block for the individual.
I think that's a good point. We've done a couple things recently. Last year we looked into EPP diversity based on the school districts where they commonly send their completers to see, you know, is your EPP at least as diverse as the places where your candidates go to teach? Because we've certainly heard the concern that in some parts of the state are simply more diverse than others. And what we found is that even then when you're looking at whether it's a small rural school or a big urban school, they're still not as diverse as the students that they go on to serve. So I think everybody has room for growth here. The other thing that we're excited to share is that next month we're going to be sharing a report where we had a summer fellow interview 8 ed prep programs that have made strong improvements on the report card in different areas over the past few years. And we did some qualitative work to understand how did they do that, whether that's in diversity or in provider impact. What specifically did they do that their peers can learn from to improve in those areas? So I'm hopeful that that will share some ideas and information with other EPPs in diversity and in other areas as well, but certainly something we can all continue to grow on.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing that data. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And this is not your only bite at the apple. If you have a brainwave after this call, of course, feel free to email or call me anytime. In terms of our unscored and informational metrics, we have our annual highlights module, which is twofold. EPPs get about a paragraph to describe any specific aspect of their program that they think is really exciting, innovative, something they want to share. And then there's also a state focus area. In the past, the state focus areas have been on district partnerships and literacy. diversity is actually what we're strongly leaning toward as our state focus area this year. We're open to other suggestions. One idea that has come up is something about early childhood education or a specific focus on the elementary grades. So I'll be curious to hear what would be your biggest priority for this year and then things we should keep in the pipeline for future years.
Does anybody else have anything to say? Because I was going to jump in, and I don't want to be the only one. Okay.
No, I'm fine, thanks.
So, Amy, when I was looking at this, oh, go ahead, Mike. You're
no,
fine?
I was just saying I'm good, yeah.
Okay. When I looked at this, I'm thinking, oh, you know, these are also very important, and it's you don't want to see the focus go away, but the literacy piece still is a major concern, and that may be bundled into the early childhood side of it, but I struggle with us moving away from literacy in all honesty, because we all know that that's the foundation, and if you cannot read, you know what happens beyond that. So I think diversity needs to be a focus, I really do, but how do we do that and exclude? I know we're not excluding, so I don't want to misrepresent what I'm saying or what you intend here. Mm-hmm. I think if we say the state wants to go with diversity, I'm in favor of that because we haven't done it yet, so we can stay with that. But literacy, let's not lose sight of that.
I think that's a really good point, that we want to make sure we're not shifting focus. And I will say this module, it is not scored. It's more in the way of letting our EPPs shine in terms of what they're doing about these different topics. So I think we could say specifically literacy through the lens of early childhood and elementary, and then diversity in a future year, or the other way around, diversity this year, and then reiterating in a future year, we haven't forgotten that it's still an issue with literacy.
Is it even feasible? Oh, I'm sorry, somebody else is speaking?
Yeah, this is Bob. You know, and we had our accountability subcommittee meeting last week, and clearly I think Commissioner Schwinn made it a point that from an accountability standpoint, literacy was going to be a particularly third grade, as you had mentioned before, is going to be something that's going to be a very strong focus. So I'm not sure that I read this that the state is going away from its focus on literacy. I think what they're trying to do is to also show that they are going to have a focus on diversity. I mean, I don't see them defocusing literacy at the, you know, I mean, or focusing on diversity at the expense of literacy, but maybe I'm wrong.
And Bob, that's what I was trying to say. I don't think that we're sacrificing one for the other, which is why I wanted to make sure we had this conversation to be sure we're all on the same page. The other thing, too, is that is it even realistic, or is this unrealistic to say our main three focus areas are, and you choose which one you want to highlight on your landing page or in the highlights module?
That might. Yeah.
Sort of a choose your own adventure is one way to think of it. I think we could do that. We could do that this year, or we could do it in a future year and say maybe the options are between early childhood and something else that's grade specific, so that programs that don't offer endorsements in one area might be able to focus on the other area.
Yeah, and obviously I'll go along with what the group says that they think the best approach is. It's just that was something that came to my mind as a thought, as an idea, then I thought I would float it just in case anyone else thought it might have merit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We did also hear from candidates that they wanted a bit more information on the programs themselves. We would picture that as a link to the EPP's resources on their course catalog or admissions. I don't think we want to get in the world of trying to maintain those on our own website, because then every time any EPP had a change, we would have to reflect that. I think linking to each EdPrep program would be a little bit more straightforward. Finally, we're also thinking about ways to expand our module on leader preparation. This was the first time this year that we included leader prep on the report card, and it's very bare bones, basic description and demographics. We do want to expand those demographics.
Amy,
Yeah,
can I interrupt, please?
please do, Mike.
In our report card,
Mm-hmm.
that if we're going to refer them to the EEP's website, how big a deal would it be to list their links so that someone who's going back through the report card, could then go through the links to those EEPs would be provided, and they could just make the easy move over to these.
Absolutely, we can certainly do that. Happy to do that. And I think we might already do it on the main landing page. I'm just double checking myself before yes, we do. It's when you click on any program on the About This Provider on the profile page, their website is the first thing listed, but it's their overall website. So we might be able to provide some more direct links to specific resources. Then in terms of leader prep, we're thinking about ways to expand information here. I think y'all have heard me say this before. Leader prep is a little bit more complicated. Traditionally, somebody completes their teacher prep and they go on to teach in fairly short order that year or the next year. Leader prep is different. I might go get my administrative license knowing I want to teach for 4 more years. After that, I go become an assistant principal for several years before I'm in charge of my own building. So at that point, if we're coming up on a decade out from the prep program, how fair is it to actually hold those programs accountable for eventually my school-wide TVAS or something like that? We're working with the department's researchers as well as those at Vanderbilt's Tennessee Education Research Alliance to figure out what would be the most appropriate methods to consider prep. But at the very least, we should build out the information we include on the candidates and their background, as well as information about the program structure. So is it a year-long residency? How are you mentored? What kind of supports do you receive? But I'll be open to other ideas there as well.
Amy, this is Lillian. You know, one of the things that I think about in regard to what you just said, when candidates on their own decide to go into a leader prep program, perhaps without counseling, without anyone asking them to do so. In the past, it had been, I'll take this program because it means I have another degree, perhaps, or yeah, certainly another degree. But I might have an increase in my salary because I have this, and that's no longer the path to getting an increase in your salary. And so it just seems to me that maybe at the front end of the ed prep side of it, especially when we encounter issues where a candidate may not even intend to become an administrator, has that licensure, and then never becomes a leader. So my concern is there anything at the front end where that's a survey question or something that happens at the ed prep side, because we have these people who get told you have to go back and get another you have to go back through ed prep again, leader prep, I'm sorry. I'll get this act together. Leader prep again because so much time has passed and the standards have changed. So I don't know if it's even realistic or fair to ask them to do that because something.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we would want to include here is information about that partnership with districts, where what you'd ideally see is a pipeline where your school leader or somebody at your district sees potential in a teacher and encourages them to go to a leader prep program, and there's collaboration all along the way with both the district and the program supporting the candidate. I think that that's more of an ideal world. You also have folks who just decide this is going to be for me without consulting with their district or any other leaders, and then it's more they have to meet the expectations of the leader prep program.
The other thing, too, is program effectiveness, and how do we go about measuring that? And I would suggest perhaps through feedback from the field on the effectiveness of the program, but and that's assuming, obviously, that the candidate has been placed in a leadership position, if you will.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the leader prep is going to continue to be a work in progress. I know it's one that we've talked about in the advisory council several times, and it's just going to have to be a real time working with the prep providers and to come up with a meaningful evaluation, meaningful scoring system. Just get a lot of feedback and work it and recognize we're going to have to change it year to year until we get it right.
I think that's right. And we've been trying really hard with the report card that before we start scoring things, that we have them provided as information for a year. So it might be that this is a year where we build it out and we have more and more information available, and then we think about what and when is appropriate to score. Finally, we will continue that process of stakeholder feedback. We have the TACD conference, the Tennessee Association of Colleges of Teacher Education, in September. Lillian and Mike will be on a panel there, so I'm very excited to join you all for that, talking not just about the report card, but about the State Board's vision for EdPrep overall and how we can be partners with our EdPrep programs. We'll also have a breakout session where we share information on that report we're working on about the programs that have seen significant improvements in the report card in recent years. We'll be sharing with the Tennessee Association of School Personnel Administrators, so primarily HR professionals, in November about different ways they could use the report card for hiring and recruiting. We have report card advisory council meetings. We had one in January, we have one in September and one in November, and we'll have a WebEx quick conference call in January before the launch. We continue our work with research partners and our collaboration with DOE. We had Erica Light start last week in the role of Senior Research Associate. She's our lead project manager for the report card, and she's already diving in and scheduling meetings with the department's data and research team and the licensure and prep team to ensure we have clean and reliable data moving forward. So we're delighted to have Erica and introduce her in person in the future. Happy to be here.
Welcome.
All right. Any final questions or comments on what I just shared about the report card and changes for the coming year?
Amy, I just had some final, and I hate to be it's not a dead horse because it's just the critical subject matter that we talked about earlier, and that is early literacy, and especially the role that our ed preparation providers play in this entire arena. And I think ensuring that each of our EPPs are in fact, I know they are, but I want to articulate this in a way that makes sense to everyone, because it's one thing, the burden is of course in the school districts, and the schools are dealing with people who come to school hungry, dealing with children whose parents are in different places in their lives, and they may be addicted to drugs, students who have truancy issues. There are all kinds of challenges, and the students come to school and they've not had a book read to them. They've not had exposure in the same way that other students who come from a strong socioeconomic background. So there are a variety of issues that are at play, and school districts often will tell me, we didn't create the gap, but we sure did inherit it, and we're doing everything in our power to move the needle in the right direction. But I'm asking the question, and I want to know, how do ed prep programs teach? How do they instruct teacher candidates to teach children how to read? So it's the instructional side of it that I want to know more about, and I want to make sure that we do not lose sight of that, because we put a lot of pressure on the districts to move the needle in the right direction, but our ed prep partners, who are excellent partners in this work, I want to reiterate and make a strong message about the importance of what they're doing to prepare candidates, and not just the early grades, all grade levels. Attention needs to be given on how we teach them to instruct students when they get in the classroom. I'm going to get off my soapbox.
No, I appreciate it. I think the report card is one venue for that. We also have our licensure and prep policies, so I think we definitely need to continue digging in, and I hope that I know we have some prep partners who I'm sure are tuned in now, but feel free to continue sharing that message at TACD and every chance you get.
So to continue to beat Lillian's horse, early grades, we know, is setting the foundation. But there are tens of thousands of kids in Tennessee who will not have been able to have had the benefit of the early grade baseline for reading, and they're in biology and they can't read. That the teacher who gets endorsed in biology should have some skill in helping a student who really is challenged in reading to work through that in order to master biology. I mean, it's sort of like it's like Lillian says, it's all the way through the continuum. Some kids will enter Tennessee system in the midstream. We got kids right now who are on track to graduate who are not going to be able to read. We know that, and teacher candidates need to have some skill in being able to help those kids learn to read in order to master.
Absolutely. And in our policy 5.505, which is our literacy standards for each specialty area program, the board did approve several years ago that for every single endorsement area, including 612 science, there are literacy standards that candidates have to be taught in every single area. And I know our Ed Prep partners have been working really closely with the Department of Ed over the past 18 months to 2 years to develop plans for each of those areas and get them approved by the department. So those are now in place, and candidates will be getting that moving forward. So I think it'll be important that we monitor both the implementation on the EPP side, but then also, are we seeing any different outcomes based on that policy and those standards?
To Lillian's point, I would like to know how that works as well. The early school. How are we preparing any teacher at any? How are they getting that training?
So you'd be interested in what classes are they being offered? What's the curriculum like at the Ed Prep side, where somebody who's getting a 612 science endorsement is also learning about literacy? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we'll work on it.
Yeah, I will jump in with my 2 cents and say that I totally agree with what both Mike and Lillian are saying in what you're presenting that is out there. But I will also add one other factor is that Representative Reagan, I've had several conversations with him, one as recently as last night, who is the chair of the K through 12 subcommittee. And this is a very important point that he brings up again, is how are they learning in the EPPs to teach the literacy to our students. So I think that's something we ought to look at. And as Mike can say, it's not just in the 3rd grade, it's throughout the whole system.
Sure.
I think I heard Nathan.
Just want to pop in for 1 second and say to Amy, I was hoping that you would make the point that you did just make in terms of the rules and the policies that we have put in place that require this, because I know we've sat down in legislator meetings with each of the members of this subcommittee and their individual legislators, and the issue comes up. There's, even from as a dad with dyslexic now 4th grader, sitting across from a pretty good district who didn't seem to really grasp the idea of that 3rd grade reading law and all of the implications of it. But I just want to say to Amy, thank you for getting into those policies. I think having those examples out there is important, because when we meet with anyone in the lawmaking realm, of course, this is their interest. It's the first thing they ask about, especially Chairman Representative White out of Shelby County, who's the chair of the full Education Committee on the House side, wanting to know, okay, what additional laws could we bring to make this better? How do we get every teacher that's trained to have the fundamentals of teaching reading, even to those who learn it differently? And so talking about those policies was so critical as part of this discussion.
Absolutely. And I'll be happy to send that around as just a reminder, and you can look at them and see what's included in the policy now and be thinking about anything you might want included or revised in the future.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Nathan.
Sure. So moving forward a little bit to a different topic, our next presentation will be from Kathy Pruner and Jerry DeLuca at ETS on a product called ProEthica. In the EdPrep rule, we now require all EPPs to train their candidates on the Model Code of Ethics for Educators, which has been adopted by many states nationwide as professional standards for educators, as well as the Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics, which is in state law. And those two things are really complementary. There's nothing in one that is conflicted with in another. They're both the important standards for folks who are in classrooms. There's also a newer state law that says every educator must receive professional development every year on the Tennessee Teacher Code of Ethics. That's really critical. As you all know, our office deals with cases of educator misconduct that could result in licensure actions. So whether that's an inappropriate relationship with a student or being under the influence on campus, any number of different things, our staff attorneys review those cases every month and then present them to you all to vote on for what the action should be, whether it's a license suspension, reprimand, revocation. Now, some situations are cut and dried, right? We all know that if somebody's having an inappropriate relationship with a student, that's wrong. However, there are some scenarios that are things that even a well-meaning educator might find themselves getting into some gray area on and to need more information and guidance on how to proceed. So Jerry and Kathy will be talking about ProEthica and how they've been seeing it used in Tennessee so far. I do want to make it clear we invited them to share this information because it's something Tennessee EPPs are interested in and some have adopted. However, there may be other products that do the same thing. Districts might also continue to develop their own trainings as an option, and we're interested in hearing what you all think about it. So Jerry and Kathy, I'll move forward in your slides for you. Just give me a heads up when you'd like those clicked through.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Amy, and good morning, Madam Chair and other members of the committee. I'm Kathy Pruner, and I'm a Client Relations Director at Educational Testing Service. Been working with this company for 21 years and with the Praxis program and the educator preparation products for the last 8.5 years. So, and I've been servicing Tennessee for the last 2.5 years, and it's been a pleasure being in the state, working with the board and the Department of Ed, also the educator prep programs, and I've been at a few of your meetings. I've met, I think, most of you at meetings in the past. So thank you for giving us the time to introduce you to ProEthica today, and I'll let Jerry introduce himself.
Thank you, Kathy. Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So good morning. Jerry DeLuca. I was a career educator for 25 years, taught high school physics and chemistry in the north central mountains of West Virginia. In the last 20 years, I've been with ETS in a variety of roles. I'm now a strategic advisor, and it's great to be with you this morning, and I'll not take any more time and turn it back over to Kathy.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I just wanted to just talk a little bit about the foundations of ETS. You saw those 3 organizations listed there, and ETS started over 70 years ago in 1947 with the Council on Education and then College Board. All those organizations came together, Carnegie Foundation also, American Council on Education, Carnegie Foundation, and the College Board, and they came together to form ETS. And really, this was an idea from the leader, Henry Chauncey, and also James Conant, who was the president of Harvard at the time. Back in the 40s, the only way to get into college was how much money your parents had or if they were legacies at different universities. And these gentlemen believed that a single organization focused on assessment and research could really make a significant difference in American education and promote equal equity for all. And that was really the foundations of ETS. We are not-for-profit still to this day. And being a not-for-profit really has afforded us to do some really cool things. And I'll ask you to go to the next slide. So you can see our mission, our vision, our values are really still the same after all. It says more than 60 years. It's actually now 70 years. But quality and equity in education is really paramount, and helping students and teachers and parents and providing opportunities. We really are also grounded in equity and social responsibility for not only the employees and our community here, but really for the public as a whole in general. And we are an international company. And I got to experience a lot of that firsthand working in the TOEFL program, working with international programs. So you can go to the next slide. And as I said, because we're a not-for-profit, it really allows us to do some really unique things, and ProEthica is one of those things. And ProEthica was a program that started really out of a situation that happened a few years back. You might recall a large cheating scandal that went on in the state of Georgia. And we were asked by folks in Georgia to work with them to create a product to really focus on training their educators in ethics, educator ethics. So that's how the focus of ProEthica began and how it all came up from the ground up in Georgia. And then we took that and we expanded it into a national program. And at the end of this presentation, we'll go over a little bit about where ProEthica is being used in some of the other states as well. So if you want to go, we know, as Amy was saying, that every day teachers are facing situations that they're really not prepared for. There's a lot of gray areas that they get involved in, and we want to stop them before they ever cross that line. So ProEthica is all about the area to the left of that line. We don't want this to be a remediation. We want this to be more preventative, to get teachers to think about how they can think ahead and face these situations and make decisions with the least amount of risk. And if you want to click that again, I think there's another couple things on that slide. Yeah, and so a lot of times the community that they work in just expects teachers to be able to, do the right thing. Well, they should know better. And there really is so many situations where just knowing better is not enough. So that's where ProEthica comes in. ProEthica is based in research. Dr. Troy Hutchings reviewed hundreds of scenarios and captured them, those everyday dilemmas that educators are faced with, and boiled them down and found they can boil down into 10 different domains. So really trying to get educators to understand all the professional risks and what ethics really are. A lot of states have codes of conduct that are more regulatory, and this code of ethics is more trajectory thinking and learning how to behave and react and act in a way that will have the least amount of risk to more guiding principles than statutory limitations. So thinking about all those situations in advance, using the model code of ethics for educator that came out of NASDAQ as the framework for all those decisions. And we used the model code as the basis for ProEthica. So we took those 5 major principles and all the different sub-principles, 85 in all, from the model code and really distilled them down into videos and games and activities that are found within the ProEthica program. It also begins that conversation, whether it's in a prep program or whether it's in a school district, to have those difficult conversations with leadership and your colleagues about all these kinds of situations. So it really opens the door for those kind of conversations. And we know states and districts have those rules and policies in place, and this acts as a perfect complement to that. So we really feel that this can fill in and really help teachers think ahead and think about situations that they haven't faced yet, but they may face, and then feel more equipped to handle it if that ever comes, into play in their life as a teacher. Okay, and that's a quote by Chief Justice Earl Warren there. So working with the Georgia folks, it turned out a lot of the Georgia folks work for NASDAQ, and NASDAQ facilitated the creation of the Model Code of Ethics for Educators, but they had a lot of development partners in doing so. And you'll see that a lot of the governing bodies in education were all part of this project to create the Model Code. So you can see the teachers' unions are there, the CAPE is there, CAPE program is there, the Council for Chief State School Officers, the National Association of Elementary School Principals, and also the National Association of Secondary School Principals. The National Board is there, the NEA. So we have really all of those organizations that came together, and so the Model Code is Ethics for Educators that was created by educators, because all these organizations had a piece in that development. And so you know that the ProEthica program is actually aligned to this. We actually did a research study looking at the alignment with the Model Code of Ethics for Educators with the ProEthica program. And actually out of that study came the findings that it was very well aligned, but this group of educators that met here in Princeton doing that work felt that there needed to be a little more on digital and social technology, so we actually added a 7th module about 2 years ago to have it even more enhanced with those kind of situations that seem to be a big gray area for teachers today. Okay, next slide. And so what we have is 2 versions of this product, a pre-service version and an in-service version. And within each of those 2, we have a version for teachers and one for your instructional leaders or school leaders. So the pre-service version is called the Foundations version, and that's really foundational preparation that the EPPs can use for their requirements. And as Amy said, this will help and enable them to meet new requirements to train in the Model Code of Ethics for Educators, or in some states, they're using it for initial licensure as well. And for the Essentials version, we have, of course, great professional development or continued licensure or professional development requirements that the state needs. And again, on the Essentials version, we also have a teacher version and a school leader or instructional leader version. And then the next slide, you'll just see a little bit side by side. I wanted to give you a view of, what's the difference here between these versions. With the Foundation version, you can see they have a one-time use of the different modules that we'll be taking a look at today. And then they'll also be able to have access to those for the whole year. And this content is targeted for pre-service teachers. So it's designed for them. And when you get to the in-service version, again, they have the modules that they can use in the first year, or a district can open up use all 3 years right from the start. It's really up to the districts how they want to structure this, but they have 3 years of use of the program. So you have all of the 7 modules, different modules than previous version that they got maybe in their prep program if they did. And then we also have targeted content for in-service teachers. On both of these versions, we do have end-of-module assessments and a certificate that can be given. But with the in-service version, we go into years 2 and 3, or they can start using it even sooner with extended learning materials. And we'll talk a little bit about that on another slide. So, with that, I'm going to let Jerry take over and talk a little bit about some of the modules.
Sure. Thanks, Kathy. So one of the things as a career educator that you come to learn, okay, when you close your door in that first year, you're not prepared for many of the things that you're going to face and you're going to deal with. And so despite the best efforts of educator preparation programs, teaching ethics was something that was never really focused on, and we didn't have the ability to have some of the conversations around the things that you're going to face. So if you would advance the slide, please. So I think the first step for teachers is to understand that there's a responsibility to the profession, and that's something that's probably not talked about enough. And so the modules, okay, that for the educator preparation programs, we look at an introduction just to what's ethics all about? What is this responsibility I have? There's a disposition people have. There's their ethical side. There's the regulatory side, and we tend to say, well, we have a policy for that or we have a rule for that. But pro-ethics is very different than the regulatory side. Thou shalt not do this and do that. And if you do this, you know what's going to happen. That's really not the essence of pro-ethics. It's a great complement to the regulatory side, but it goes a step further. So it's helping prospective teachers know that they have a responsibility to the profession. So that's where we begin. We move forward and we look at the educator in different aspects of their profession. The professional educator and the student. What do you need to think about as you interact with students and establish and maintaining appropriate boundaries, whether verbal, physical, or emotional? What's the responsibility for the professional educator in the school community? How do they approach that? What's the professional responsibility for that educator in his community? And that he goes out in the community and reflects professional values within the community. And how does that impact his job? As Kathy said, we don't live in a common sense society anymore. It would be great if we did, but the whole idea of technology and digital and social media, something I didn't have to deal with when I taught, but so much a part of the fabric of education today. And then finally, just the ethical decision-making process for the professional educator. What are the consequences of the decisions I make with students, with my fellow teachers, with my principal, with the community? And so these modules play out, okay, in powerful ways. And so while Pro-Ethica checks off the box for dealing with ethics training, okay, it's a powerful way to check off the box. It really has meaning. So could you advance the slide, please? Okay, so when we first envisioned this, we looked at the individual. What needs to happen? We looked at how could we involve the school, how could we involve the community in terms of looking at ethics in education. And this slide's not as important as the next, so if you could go on. Here's how the program was structured originally. We thought, well, you know what? There's these 7 online modules that I just talked about, and it helps teachers recognize and navigate and mitigate risks they never knew they were going to face. And then we build upon that. So at the district level, for example, there are 8 conversation guides that explore important education case laws and all map back to the Model Code of Educator Ethics. And in the third year of a program, if you want to go deeper, there are 10 conversation guides that articulate and defend the standard of care. In other words, what should we expect from an educator in terms of dealing with these ethical dilemmas? Not everybody is going to do the same thing in the same way all the time. They're individuals. But what can you fall back on so you know teachers are recognizing what the risks are and behaving in a manner that establishes a standard of care for students in their schools and their communities that are meaningful? What we found out, okay, this wonderful 3-year program, we talked to a lot of districts and a lot of district superintendents, and on that side of Pro-Ethica, they wanted a toolbox. They wanted things that they could use as appropriate. And so what we've done is we've made the Pro-Ethica program available to districts. They get all the materials up front. They get 3 years worth of materials. All right, they can use them with flexibility to meet their needs, and it's proven to be, I think, how districts want to look at this a little bit better or a little bit differently. that how we envisioned it. And so what we've done is we've made changes to the program to allow them to do that. I do want to mention that the Tennessee Organization of State School Superintendents in Tennessee, we were introduced to them a little less than a year ago, and they saw the Pro-Ethica program. And knowing that districts have a responsibility legislatively to deal with ethics at the district level, they loved it, and they've been extremely supportive in helping us make districts aware of Pro-Ethica. So thanks to them for their efforts. I think they clearly have the best interest of Tennessee districts and teachers and students in mind. So thanks to them. Okay, could you go to the next slide, please? Kathy, I think, do you want to talk about the module activities?
So I just wanted to let you see a little bit about within the first year of the module program, how that works. There's video scenario activity based on a primary topic, and then there's different activities around that. But within the primary topic, we explore the risk that the teacher, the educators faced in that particular situation. So it really makes students think about it. There's also documentation that is attached to some of these scenarios, so you can open it up and read some actual case law that happened or situations in real life that happened similar to this. And so it really makes it engaging to them to watch the video, and you're going to see some of those videos today. There's also secondary topics within each of those modules. And there are about 10 to 15 activities and exercises. A lot of them are kind of game-based to make it more engaging. User has to make a choice. And again, PDF resources attached. And then as I said, the only thing really assessment-wise about this product, because I consider this 85% professional development, maybe 15% assessment, are just some questions or knowledge checks at the end of the modules. As a prep program, students would get 2 attempts, and if they don't pass, they would move on. Really not a difficult thing to pass these assessments if they've been looking at the module previously. And then with school districts, it's defaulted to 5 attempts before they move on, but districts can actually turn that on or off, change that number at will. We work with districts to do that. And then, of course, those module tests are aligned with each of the individual modules. So the next. And this just shows you a couple screenshot of some of the activities within the modules. You saw the secondary topics listed, and you can see a couple here. There's a game called Inspire or Diminish. They give you a scenario, and you have to determine whether it inspires or diminishes confidence in the education profession or that educator. The module 3 with the phone showing there, that is what could happen situation. A lot of things could possibly happen in some of these branching scenarios, so that you get to see that play out in that game. And then the one at the very bottom left, Act This Way. So they give you a situation, and then you choose A or B, what the option you would take as the educator, and then it gives you whether you've chosen correctly or not, and why. So it gives you all the rationale and explanations behind that. So there's a lot of written commentary behind each of these games too. Okay, next one. And just to let you know, as either a university or a district, there's scores for the end of module tests that are reported through our data manager system, the same system that your programs use with the Praxis scores. We have a branch of that for the Pro-Ethica. And the progression is actually shown within the enrollment management system. So Milligan College, who just enrolled with us in the last 2 weeks, that person who's looking at that will be able to enroll her candidates. She'll be able to watch progress. She'll be able to really go through the system and see where students are and how they've completed, where they are with the modules in completion. And I'll show you a screenshot of that later. And then look at, there'll be additional resources for program providers that are available in that management system. And you can go to the next slide to see a screenshot as a facilitator, what they might see as on their dashboard. So there's implementation materials, there's learning module materials listed there, there are reporting and scoring is shown there, the enrollment button, and then a lot of different support materials. There's a resource library. So you can see it's kind of a lot of things at their fingertips, and even purchasing additional vouchers. So we've had, districts call us. I service Arkansas. I've gotten comments or calls or emails from districts saying, we need to get more vouchers. They can do that right within the system, so it makes it really seamless for them. Okay, you want to go on? Just to see here, this educator's score report, you can see the date that they attempted, the knowledge check at the end, and what the percent correct is, and whether they passed or didn't pass. So we do have all those score reports. And then, of course, they also get a certificate upon completion. I know some of the LEAs in Arkansas like to have their candidates give them their certificate at the end to show completion of the program. All right. So the next slide, we're actually going to look at a video. So I want to play a little bit of this. We don't have to play this all the way through, Amy. Maybe we could stop halfway through because it's a little long, and I have a couple other videos I'd like to give them some time with as well. So let's get started to look at Noah's story.
Just give us a shout when you want it turned off.
Okay.
Richard, thank you for coming in so early. You know Catherine, our school counselor?
Of course. Hi, Catherine.
We've got a delicate situation here. As you probably heard, Jake Townsend committed suicide last night.
I heard. It's terrible. There are already conversations and theories flying around about this, and the kids are really shaken up.
That's why I've asked you here. We have an immediate concern about Jake's best friend, Noah. Until we can get a crisis response plan moving, I want to get some support in place.
We know Noah's in your class and a part of the student government. His mom tells us that you're an adult that he can really talk to.
We need you to step in here, Richard. This boy needs our support.
I'll do anything to help Noah. What can I do?
It sounds like you've got a great connection with him already. Just be there for him. Support him.
Noah's a great kid. I'll do everything I can. Noah, got a sec? I know this is a tough time for you. I just want you to know that I'm here if you ever need to talk.
Thanks, Mr. G. It's just, I can't believe he's gone. I don't understand why he did it. It just doesn't make sense. He was here yesterday, and now he's gone.
Hey, I'm here for you. Look, it's going to be like this for a while. The sadness will just grab you. It's tough, but I'm going to give you my cell number. Call me if you need anything.
Thanks, Mr. G. What's your number?
Hey, Noah, what's up? Sure, I get it. It can be tough being alone. I'm at the school right now, and I'm going to be here for quite a while, so if you want, you can come down and get your homework done. All right. See you in a bit.
Okay, Amy.
All right, we'll pause it right
We'll
here.
stop that there. And I just wanted to give you a snippet of that so you can see it continues on with more texting. And then Noah's mother finds out that this is going on, and she calls the principal, explodes, very upset that this inappropriate texting and conversations have been going on past school hours with this educator and her son. So that's the main scenario there. And you can see it really talks about, the crossing the boundaries of time, place, and role with this educator. And also the fact you can see that he wasn't really given much guidance from the administration to begin with in terms of how he should support this student. So the next, the video then is supported with some perspectives. So the next slide will show you a perspective from
coming in.
Okay. This is the principal's perspective, which you'd click on and listen to the principal. Go ahead.
Speed was of the essence here. I got a call at 4 a.m. that morning notifying me of the suicide. I know the policies and procedures, and we follow them. But it takes time for a crisis team to get organized, and I felt that some level of intervention was needed immediately. I had real concern about Noah, as well as the rest of the kids in our school. Clustering of suicide is too common, and we didn't want to rash a copycat incidents. So we made sure the students got support immediately. When I asked Mr. Gall to support Noah, just while the crisis team got organized, I was not giving him permission to break policy.
Okay, and then we're going to go to the next one so you can see the counselor's perspective.
I get it. Mr. Gall is a great teacher. His intentions are good, and he had the best connection with Noah. Just got in too deep.
All right, and last, and again, you get to look at all these perspectives with all the videos in each of the modules.
After seeing all those messages come flying in this weekend, I took a look at my son's phone records. Hundreds of text messages, phone conversations going into the wee hours of the night. My attorney said the school completely failed to follow its own procedures for handling these situations. They failed to provide oversight. They asked a completely untrained teacher to provide support.
Okay, so I guess you can get an idea of the kinds of perspectives we'll give you behind each of the videos.
All those messages come flying.
Sorry, we're good.
Okay, and let's just take another look at a different video because I just want to give you a flavor of the kinds of videos we have. This one's a good one called with a named Hester.
Hi. Hester, I've asked you to stay after lunch because I wanted to speak with you privately. You don't seem very happy this week, and you're not participating the way you usually do. Sorry? Oh, don't be sorry. You're not in trouble. I just want to see if everything's all right. I'm okay. Hester, is there something you want to talk to me about? What's wrong, Hester?
They're bothering me.
Who's bothering you?
My big sister and her friends.
What happened, Hester?
That pink carpet support you gave me, well, when they see it, they take it and they make fun of me for it. They push me and call me names.
And you're worried because it's the first of the month and you're going to get a report today? Well, first of all, Hester, you're doing really well in my class. And the report may say improvement needed on something, but everybody can improve on something. That's all the report's about.
Well, why do you have to give it just to me?
Hester, there's several students in my class like you who, you're not the only one that gets the pink progress report. It's my job. You know how you get some extra help sometimes with your reading?
'Cause I'm dyslexic?
Yes. Part of that help is us sending those reports home so your family knows how you're doing towards your goals. And the part that said on the report, more improvement needed, that's just part of the form. Have you talked to your mother about what your sister and her friends do?
No. When my mom sees that sheet and she sees that I need improvement, she gets mad and she yells at me and smacks me. Please, Ms. Gonzalez, can't you just write down that I don't need improvement?
Don't I have to do that report for all the kids with IEPs? I can't lie on it, can I? Could I just not write much down? What's that teach, Hester? If she knows I'm not telling the whole truth. What if the principal reads the file copy? Can I tell her about her friends who also get that report? Would that violate their confidentiality? And her sister and her friends. Are they bullying her? What do I do about that? If I report it, the kids are going to know Hester told. Will that make it worse for her? And her mother smacks her? What does that mean? Hester is always exaggerating. Is this for real? Is it child abuse? Should I report that? Should I call the cops? And then what? Hester goes to protective services? Wait a minute. Isn't it mandatory to report abuse? What happens if I don't? Could I lose my license?
Okay, I think that's a great example of the competing tensions that a teacher has to face, and it doesn't have to be, about sexual misconduct. I mean, just all the different kinds of cases that and decisions that a teacher makes, thousands of them in a day, kind of play out there with her, with conflict of interest and reporting, all the regulatory worries that she had. And so I think that's a great video. Then it explores more into that case as well. So I'm going to pass this back over to Jerry so he can take you through one of the year 2 scenarios.
Sure. And Amy, I just want to ask, how are we fixed for time? I want to be mindful and respectful of the group's time.
At about 10:30, we'll turn it over to the Department of Education for a few updates. So I would say about 15 minutes.
Okay. So that's very helpful. Thank you very much. So the kinds of things that went through Hester's head those are the kinds of things that as an educator you may never think about until you step into that classroom for your first year. So I think the power of the program is within the authenticity and the quality of the production. There's a little bit of a lag with the medium we're going over, but the power really is in the authenticity, the relevancy, the timeliness of the topics and the things that are the modules that are in the program. So for the districts, okay, there's a year 2 program, and again, but they can use this however they want to. Year 2 module stuff, okay, or again to use, they can use conversation guides, okay, with their employees. We looked at, a lot of schools have professional learning communities now, and they're looking to do something meaningful in terms of professional development. So what I'd like to do is take one snippet of a video. This is one of the conversation guides. It's based on a case law in education about a suicide pact. And the suicide pact was between 2 girls, and the teacher didn't take it seriously, and they went through with this suicide pact. So if you could start this, please.
I think the easy answer is to say anytime you hear a kid say they want to kill themselves, you automatically report. But it's not that easy in the classroom, because how many times as a teacher do we have a kid say, oh, I just want to kill myself? And it's a flippant remark, or they say, kill me. So it's like, is this a call for help, or is this just you're saying you're frustrated? And it becomes very difficult to know what is that line of this is a serious situation or this is just a frustrated kid.
Sometimes kids do things for the shock factor. So it's for get attention. Maybe there is no true intent, not that we can not act on any of it, but sometimes I think they want to see what'll happen.
Yeah, they want to see what's going to happen.
Especially at the age of 13.
I think if you ask yourself, if I didn't say something about this and the worst happened, how would I feel? Would I feel like I did everything reasonably I could be expected to do, or is there something more I could do?
Because it's so serious, it's not a decision or a reporting process you make on your own just flippantly. You can't go maverick and just say, I think this is what's happening, and in my best judgment, I'm going to make the report. You do it in consultation with your team teachers, with your administrator, with your counselor, and so we all have each other's back in that. And so it takes a little bit of the pressure off to know that you've done the right thing when you've been supported in that.
And you have to really be communicative with each other and just say, okay, we got to call the parent, and then we got to bring the child in and talk to them or whatever. But
okay, Amy, can you pause that, please?
The tipping point, right?
Thank you. So when we talk to individuals, district superintendents, HR people, we ask them, are these the kind of conversations that your employees are having, your teachers are having? And in the majority of cases, they say they're not. And so these important case laws in education, these precedent-setting cases, they frame the if you will, the conversation guides in year 2, which now districts can use at their, whatever works best for them, give them a meaningful way for the district to deal with these issues and have these difficult conversations in a meaningful way. And there's a leader version of this as well. what a lot of districts have told us is they want their leaders and principals to go through this first, and they have a wealth of meaningful information then to work with their educators, as they go through the year or however they want to use it. And so I don't know if you can advance it. Yeah, so that's great. Okay. So we're not going to show you a conversation guide from year 2, but I think you can see the quality of these things. And what you just saw, by the way, was an actual, one of the districts that was using the ProEthica program gave us permission to come in and actually film them having one of the conversations around one of the conversation guides. And so, our thanks for them for letting them do that. And so you weren't seeing anything that was staged. That was actually the kind of discourse that goes on around these. Now, the establishing and articulating a standard of care, again, I mentioned that earlier. Not everybody is going to react the same way and is going to handle things in the same way. They're all individuals. But what is an expected level of care that we can bring our children? And if we have something that levels the playing field somewhat, and that's the Model Code of Ethics. So the Model Code of Educator Ethics gives us a framework to make decisions from that help us recognize that risk, mitigate that risk, and navigate those difficult conversations. Then the conversation guides around this module, if you will, to help us do that. Help us see the right way to do it is not to go down the hall and talk to your buddy, and decisions are made based on, individuals' beliefs and values. But there's some level of expectation that educators should bring to this decision-making process. You can advance it, Amy, if you will. So, and when the research was done on this program, that's exactly what they found out, is that there was not a medium, there was not a mechanism, rather, for teachers to talk about this stuff. They were generally hard, difficult conversations. They didn't know where to go, and so they either fell on their own personal opinion, values, belief, their friends' personal opinions, values, and belief, or sometimes even a school culture, which may or may not be appropriate, right? But what we want to do is get to a level of care and decision-making that's supported and can even be defended. And so in the world of accountability is, what have you done to help your teachers with these kind of difficult situations they find themselves in? This is something that, like I say, doesn't check off the box. Okay, well, it does check off the box. It's a very powerful way to do so. So I think you can advance it. Okay, Kathy, you want to talk about some of the things that are going on in around the country with this?
Sure. Okay. This just gives you an idea, a flavor of where the product's being used across the country right now. Arkansas has been using this for a number of years. The state actually put a requirement in place that anybody coming in through alt-route programs needed to have not only training in the Arkansas Code of Ethics, but the Model Code of Ethics for educators, and that the ProEthica program, if one of the out-route programs that were to use this, it would meet that requirement for the training in the Model Code, similar to what you're doing. The external alt-route programs, the state alt-route program is using it as well. They have one run right out of the Department of Ed there. Prep programs are using this as well. Some of them are embedding it in one of their courses. The regional co-ops are using it. I kind of mentioned the LEA earlier. They're using this. And then districts. We've gotten out to some of the districts. We've been talking to them, and more and more districts are picking this up and then continuing with it over the years. So that's going on with your neighbor to the southwest. And then Delaware is using it with induction programs there with new teachers. Georgia, we talked about Georgia using this product right from the start. This was a product created for them, and the licensure requirement is the use of it there. In Pennsylvania, it's being used for Act 48 professional development credit there. So they do have to meet PD credit requirements, and this fulfills credit requirements, PD points there in Pennsylvania. And then in Texas, a lot of the districts are starting to use the product there. So it's kind of spreading out, and thought I had it on this slide, but there should have been another bullet that listed Tennessee on there because Milligan College is like the first adopter in the state of Tennessee to use this. I got an email from somebody I've been working with at Milligan over the last 2 years on Praxis Matters, and she reached out to me to say that the dean was interested in looking at the program they did, and they are getting started this semester with their alt route candidates, the MAT candidates, their leadership, their candidates as well. So all the different programs, and then the regular traditional prep programs are going to prep candidates are going to be using it as well. So that's in Milligan. I'll be at TACD in a couple weeks with my colleague Peter Yeager, and we'll be talking to the EPPs at TACD about using ProEthica. So doing outreach there. And for EPPs, this does help them also meet one of the standards at CAPE 3.6. So that kind of nice for them to meet sometimes state requirements, but also CAPE requirements with it. And then school districts are certainly using it for mentoring and professional development. So that just gives you a flavor of the use of the product around the country so far. And then that leads us to the last slide, really, just to give you the URL for the website for ProEthica. And I encourage you, if this sounds interesting to you and you'd like to even explore it a little bit further, take a look at the website. There's some great videos and more videos to look at, and a lot of good information there. So I'll stop here and see, you might have some questions that you'd like to ask.
This is Bob. First, let me say that what I've seen here is excellent. And having worked in the business world for 45 years, you can't get too much training in ethics. And what we've gone through in our licensure decisions, et cetera, I think every bit of this could be helpful. How long are each one of these modules? And I'll ask Amy, I presume there is an ethics course that is required by the EPPs. Is that correct? I think I remember.
It is not required to be a course. It is required now in rule that they train candidates on the Model Code of Ethics for Educators. But they could do it as a standalone course. They could embed it in different courses. They could do it as a seminar, any number of practices.
So these 7 modules, let me go back now to ProEthica. These 7 modules, how long are each one of the modules?
Well, it would take maybe 45 minutes, a total of about 4 to 5 hours to do the full thing. I mean, some of the universities in Arkansas will embed it in a law and ethics class or another kind of course, and they might assign it throughout. For the EPPs, it's just the one-year program. They would just assign it throughout the semester, and they could have discussion about it or not. It's really up to them how they want to utilize it. But, yeah. It's not an onerous kind of time commitment. It's really could be done with less than 5 hours.
And I presume that there's probably other products out there that are competitors to you or something, so I can't endorse one or the other. But like I say, I certainly would encourage the EPPs to have some kind of a requirement for ethics training, and then the districts follow up in their annual training. I think, and the examples that you gave here just seem to me right on. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And this is Lillian. I echo what Bob just said. I'm just curious because I know we're about to run out of time. Do you offer statewide licenses for the EPPs jointly so that there's some economies of scales with purchase and all that, and then does that extend to districts? I'm just thinking about how could a system like, I think you said, yeah, Arkansas, seems like they're pretty consistent across the board in who it's offered to. Could you provide an answer, or that's something we could follow up later with Amy?
Right. I guess Arkansas hasn't mandated as a state requirement. It's it's a choice that they can meet some of the requirements with, but we work with districts in terms of pricing and depending on the volumes, we can certainly do better on pricing when it's larger volumes and so forth. So we can work with Amy on that in terms of this being requirement and use a state account versus just individual accounts?
I'm curious
yeah,
about
I think
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think the answer is, we think this is a really good quality product, and we'll work with states, districts / EPPs. All right, we want to see it used, and so certainly there's room for conversations around all that. Yes.
And I don't think it would be our decision to make for them. I think I just wanted to know what the options would be if, through TACD, as an example, that they come together and decide they want to assess it and make a determination jointly, if that's available to them, if they should decide to go in that direction. So that's where I was coming from.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. I know we're out of time, so I'm going to toss it back to Amy. Thank you all very much.
You're welcome.
I'm happy to follow up and facilitate these conversations. Our last presentation today will be from David Donaldson and Michael Derline from the State Department of Education. I'll let y'all introduce yourselves and then feel free to take it away.
Good morning, everyone. This is Michael Derline, Senior Director of Educator Licensure and Preparation.
And this is David Donaldson, Assistant Commissioner of Human Capital.
So, as always, we have a number of fairly brief updates for you on where we are on a number of different review processes, as well as annual reports and a few other items as well. So back in June, we held a training on the Tennessee Comprehensive Review Handbook and Process. We trained about 50 people, which means we have a fairly significant group of folks that we can assign to our comprehensive reviews, our state-managed comprehensive reviews. They were trained on the new handbook, including evidence required by EPPs through that submission, building consensus. So we had an activity where folks sat together and worked on the consensus building process, really trying to get us to a place where we have consistency of implementation of our new state-managed process. A big part of that is because we have 13 comprehensive reviews this academic year. As you all are well aware, we put reviews last year on hold so we could develop this system and then push them to this academic year. 6 of those are CAPE managed reviews. Well, I think this might be on my next slide. No, it is not. Good. 6 of those are CAPE managed reviews. 7 of those are state managed reviews. And as a reminder, during those CAPE managed reviews, we still have a team of folks who review the specialty area or licensure programs that EPPs offers. So there are really 2 teams on site. We also this year, yes, and just a reminder, that is for the 7-year approval process. So our comprehensive review handbook is also published online now, and we're using it as well for our focused reviews, which I'll talk about in just a moment. As you are also aware, we're hosting 2 interim reviews, one for Bryan College and one for South College, and that is the type of review that an EPP has to go through when they fall below expectations on annual reports in 2 consecutive years. And so we wanted to give you just a brief idea of the sorts of things that Bryan and South are now doing. The interim review process involves a root cause analysis, so we require that EPPs go into their annual reports data and determine the sorts of things that they believe are causing the deficiencies. They have to then set goals around those specific areas and propose changes to the program that are aligned to those goals. So we have a pretty rigorous process for reviewing those documents and approving them, and we've had a back and forth with both Bryan and South on those. So Bryan, they're making significant changes to program curriculum as a result of seeing poor outcomes for individuals in specific licensure areas. They're better integrating their team rubric and clinical practice. And both of these EPPs are engaging in a comprehensive review this year, so there's kind of an interesting overlay there where we're doing both an interim review and a comprehensive review for these. One thing South College is doing that I thought was worth noting was that they're ending their admissions appeals procedures. So state board rule allows for appeals of minimum GPA, ACT, SAT requirements. South College is deciding as a result of these outcomes, they're going to end that process at South College. And then other types of reviews that we are working through are focused reviews. So that includes Bethel University and Johnson University. So Bethel University is a focused review that was ordered by the Chancery Court, and we have had a number of back and forths with Bethel about the expectations for submitting evidence in our TN Atlas system. We've assigned review team members to that. Those folks have been part of the training. And on August 30th, which is this Friday, Bethel will be required to upload all of their evidence for this focus review. There will then be a period of time where that review team reviews the evidence and comes up with some initial feedback. And then it's, as it is in the comprehensive review, it's a bit of an iterative process, so Bethel will have a chance to respond to that. Johnson University is also going through a focused review. That is actually a relic from the old NCATE standards review, so they're kind of at the end of their 3-year cycle. But they're kind of in a similar situation where they're uploading evidence, and they'll be able to submit that. I believe they have to submit it in November, and then again, we'll have kind of an iterative process with them. We anticipate that we will bring recommendations for these 2 providers in spring of 2020. And as follows the focus review, the recommendation there is either denial of approval or continuing approval. Brief updates on annual reports. Production-wise, we are on track. We're actually a little bit ahead of schedule. I don't want to jinx us there. We are, as always, working very closely with State Board staff to make sure that we have good alignment between the 2 reports that are produced. A few points of interest this year, employer surveys. I also wanted to note that we hired a Director of Data and Research, Jack Powers. He was previously with the Comptroller's Office and released a pretty interesting report on educator preparation that we can certainly share with you. But Jack is leading these efforts this year. He has been collecting sample surveys from educator preparation providers on employers. We are ideally going to produce a statewide survey this year, and we'd like to include the outcomes of that survey on the Insights tool, so it would not be used for accountability this year. It would simply be used for continuous improvement purposes, with the goal of eventually including that in the accountability system. And lastly, we've mentioned this before, but instructional leader data, we now have 2 full cohorts of data, and we will begin including some baseline information on the Insights tool this year. One proposal that we are intending to bring in November is around the area of early childhood education and special education. Right now, I believe we have 4 early childhood endorsements. And we've been working internally mostly at this point with our early childhood group and special populations group to develop a proposal that would phase out most of the early childhood endorsements and create one single endorsement that is more or less a dual endorsement, though it wouldn't be 2 separate endorsements, it'd be a single endorsement leading to or preparing folks in both general and special education. So where we are with that now, we're developing a working group with LEA and EPP representatives to really dig into the standards that would be expected of providers that would want to prepare folks that lead to get that endorsement, the timeline for the phase out and phase in, and then assessment requirements. So the process is fairly similar. If you recall, we did this with middle grades endorsements. So we phased out the middle grades 4-8 endorsement and collapsed them into 4 subject-specific endorsements. And then if the SBE State Board approves this proposal, we will then develop a full review process. So EPPs would be required to submit proposals to demonstrate evidence that candidates will be adequately prepared in both areas. And then first read, I'm actually going to toss it over to David for this one. Just have a note.
Oh, great. David Allenson. Thank you, Michael. We just wanted to announce that we've had some very collaborative meetings with Executive Director Morrison and Amy Owen around licensure flexibility. They have shared survey feedback from districts regarding licensure areas to prioritize review of. And so therefore, at the upcoming Superintendent's Conference, Executive Director Morrison and myself will be presenting on feedback received, changes made to date, and then also announcing a roadshow tour that we've worked together with TOS and their Executive Director, Dale Lynch. During the last week of October, Michael and myself will be headed to West, Middle, and East Tennessee to meet with directors of schools and their HR folks to go over the current policies that are in place, as well as collecting new feedback. And we plan to come to the board in November for first read and anticipate a February 2nd read with potential licensure proposals.
And this is Amy. I just wanted to chime in lieu of Sarah being abroad right now, that we are so excited to partner with the department on this work. We spoke to this subcommittee in April about the results of that survey from district HR professionals and the changes we could make within the current scope of our legal authority. This is saying, in addition to what we've already done, what further changes might be needed to ensure that districts don't have undue barriers in hiring the best possible candidates, and figuring out where those changes need to come from, if it's something that the department is able to do, if it will require board approval, or even further steps beyond that. So really, really excited that we're going to get out and hear from folks in their areas to hear what it is that they need moving forward.
So one thing I just learned about David, he talks fast. This is Lily in Hartgrove. David, boy, do you talk fast. And I went back and I listened to that our last board meeting that I missed. You do talk very fast. You said you're going on a tour, a road show. Did you say Middle, East, and West Tennessee?
That is correct.
Okay, and you're also doing a presentation, and I'm going to miss it, unfortunately, because Bob Eby gets to go instead of Lily in Hartgrove, because I'm going to be at the TACTI conference. So I'm a little bit, I'm very interested to know more about that. And will we be able to see that presentation before you all share it with the superintendents at that conference? I think it's September the 9th through the 10th. I'm eager to see, because this is something that this subcommittee has been all over for a couple of years now. So eager to see, and can you share it with us very soon?
Yes, Lillian, I don't see why not. We're working on finalizing that next week, so I'll be happy to share it with the subcommittee ahead of time.
I appreciate that.
You got it.
And David, welcome to, I'm going to say Tennessee. I don't know where you're from, but I know you're new to the department, so welcome aboard.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I look forward to meeting you in person.
Me too. Thank you.
This is Mike.
Go for it, Mike.
You folks have a sense of the nature of these license changes that you're likely to come with?
I'll tell you a few things that we have as initial ideas. Of course, we can't predict what folks will say across the state. But as we talked about with this subcommittee in April, there may be a need to reconsider when folks are coming in from out of state with a practitioner or initial level license. Is there some sort of grace period, maybe 1 year, to allow them to take their required licensure assessments before they need to apply for their full license in Tennessee? Something like that to ease the pathway for folks coming in out of state who don't yet have a professional license. I think there's also interest in thinking about our career and technical or occupational areas of licensure to ensure that we're having a smooth pathway for folks who are experts in specific professions to come in and teach in the CTE areas. What else am I missing that's on our list? Those are the main things?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll be curious, of course, to hear what our directors of schools and HR professionals have to say as well.
Both of those, I think, are very timely, and glad to hear they may come up.
This is Bob, and I'm glad you're going on the road show to continue to get feedback from the various organizations, whether it's TACTI or TOS or whomever else, and then explaining it, going out and explaining it. I think all that communications is good. I do have a couple of questions on these reviews, if I may ask, on the focus reviews, and help me remember. So it took them a couple of years of evaluations to go to be put on this review. Once they present what they're doing to correct their deficiencies, how long do they have? Because it seems like there's got to be some kind of lag time in there from the time that they incorporate these improvements to when you would see the improvements, the results of the improvement. Or is this supposed to be done within year one, within 6 months, or help me, I can't remember.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. Are you referring to the interim or focused reviews?
Both the interim review and the focus reviews. So I assume that they're probably different, but yeah, I mean, my point is when they come in with improvements, how quickly, because I think, if you have to approve those, hopefully they've already started incorporating those before you go through the approval process. I don't know. I'm just trying to understand the timeline.
Yeah, good question. So interim reviews are pretty different from focused reviews in how they are initiated. So, and as you recall, the annual reports and report card are based on data that is slightly lagged. So, for example, the data that we're collecting right now for annual reports and report card is from 2017-18. So the interim reviews are initiated based on data that is kind of a little bit slightly dated.
Right.
So the process there is really one of intentionality and alignment, so that Bryan and South are engaged in this process to make significant changes, but those changes might not be seen in outcomes for some time, because if they're implementing them in the 2019-20 school year, only certain folks who are in their program will experience those changes, and then we would be collecting that data eventually two years from now. So I think that there's the engagement that we've had there is to really facilitate a process, forces the EPP to look very, very carefully at their outcomes that they've seen in the past, and not just haphazardly start to propose changes to their program, but do so through the lens of the specific outcomes that we saw. So they have to make direct connections between the changes and the outcomes. So for that, you're not going to see the shifts in performance immediately, but we would expect that there would be a connection to what they're doing and their outcomes.
Well, so this is Mike. I just have to think that, and I understand that, but there ought to be given some thought as to those students who are now in college paying tuition getting the benefit of those improvements.
Right.
Rather than waiting to see how it all flows through and if it works.
Yes, and they would in many cases. Like, for example, this better integration of the team rubric, there's no reason why they can't do that with candidates that are, in their junior and senior year this year.
But are we saying do it, or are we saying we don't expect that you will have to have done it, except for the incoming freshmen?
We are saying that if you are making these changes, they must be made once the plan is approved.
Okay.
But I think that this is a good point of clarification. I think we can go back to Bryan and South and make sure that this will impact current candidates, not just new candidates. There are some places where obviously, and we had a great discussion about this at the EdPrep working group meeting last week, changes to program curriculum are a little difficult if they're adding new courses or dropping specific courses. Some of that cannot be applied to current candidates, because my understanding in many cases, candidates have to be offered the program that they were given when they were first enrolled. But I think when we get into the weeds on some of the more specific changes, like how the team rubric is used in clinical practice or admissions appeals procedures, those are a little less, I think, dependent on those sorts of issues.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the point that I wanted to make, is that with these lag times, is that the effects and the benefits that the students that are in there right now are going to get are minimal, and so we need to do whatever we can do to reduce that lag time and reduce that feedback time, and encourage obvious changes to be made as quickly as possible.
I think that's right. And I think through our comprehensive review process too, programs will be encouraged to make specific changes that will impact candidates that are currently enrolled in the program. But I do think a follow-up to this, I can go back to Bryan and South and just make certain that the proposals they're making will impact current candidates, and that we're not thinking that this would just be for And I will also say some of them, I think somebody noted that, Brian and South should have been aware of some of these deficiencies well in advance of even annual reports coming out. So I can't cite the exact things, but I know that Brian in particular was already making some changes through new leadership that would have been felt a couple of years earlier that were part of their interim review process. Now, one really quick thing I wanted to note on the focused review, that's a very different type of review because it's looking back at what the provider had done in the time between our recommendation to you for major stipulations or probationary approval and today. So they've already had kind of a time period where they've had to institute changes, and we're now reflecting on whether they've adequately done that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, this is Lillian. I do have one question going back to your updates on the annual reports. In the second bullet under production, you're talking about working closely with state board staff to align the educator preparation report card. So you're working on that. Do you have an expected timeline to have that alignment completed?
I think some of it is also philosophical, Lillian, on our side as we work with our advisory council to determine, these reports do have at their heart two different purposes. One is a baseline for continuing program operation. Right. Our report card is more about highlighting the strongest practices. So I think we're interested in saying, are there places where we could use the same benchmark as the department, but maybe we also have an above and beyond gold star option, for lack of a better term right now, to highlight folks who are knocking it out of the park. So that's something where we have our advisory council meetings September 20th and I'm going to forget the date in November off the top of my head. But we're going to be working with that group to come to some final recommendations. And one of my kind of closing comments was that I think this subcommittee had been looking at reconvening in December, and I'm looking forward to sharing more firm information with you at that time.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Mike.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, to re-ask Lillian's question, do you anticipate that in December we would have the results of that alignment?
Tell me what you mean by results of the alignment. Do you mean just like where we wound up and where we're similar and where we're different?
Yes.
Yes, I do. Part of the difference is that we are charged in statute with producing the report card, and there are some metrics that we must include that are informational or not scored in the annual reports. I'm thinking specifically of employment here. The annual reports look only at retention. So there will be some areas of difference, but moving toward a tighter alignment is one of our goals.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that.
With that, I would just, any further questions, comments, or direction that you all would like to provide as we're wrapping up?
Amy, the only thing that we certainly need to follow up with Sarah and think about our next meeting, if that will be an in-person meeting or if that will be another conference call. And so I think the committee should expect to hear from you or Sarah regarding a poll to determine when we will meet again. And that was the only thing that was on my mind before we close out.
Absolutely. You guys certainly expect those scheduling polls from me at this point.
We sure do.
But we will be excited to share our progress on annual reports, report card, and some of the outcomes of these, or initial outcomes of these reviews with you at that time, as well as lots more information on what we hear about licensure issues. You'll hear about that at the November board meeting.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all very much. And without any other further questions, and I'll just hold off a second. Are there any other questions or comments before we adjourn?
None for me.
Great. Thank you all very much. I think it's, go ahead, Mike.
No, nor me.
Nor you. Okay. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your presentations. Very good discussion, and look forward to the next time when we meet again. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thanks.